I'll marry your sister." Adrian said it like an announcement, like a verdict, like Isabella was already forgotten. She set down her wineglass slowly, deliberately, and looked at every face at that table. Her mother, her sister, the man she once planned to grow old with. Not one of them flinched. So Isabella Carter lifted her chin and said the only name that could shatter that room. "That's fine. I'm already with Luca Moretti. If you're watching this story for the first time, welcome, subscribe to our channel, and follow Isabella's journey all the way to the end. And drop a comment telling us what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels." The reservation was under her mother's name. That should have been Isabella's first warning. Patricia Carter did not make restaurant reservations. She did not organize family dinners. She did not call her eldest daughter 3 times in 1 week with warmth in her voice, unless she wanted something, or unless she had already taken something and needed Isabella to find out in a controlled environment, surrounded by people where making a scene would be impossible. Isabella knew all of this. She went anyway. Because she was 34 years old, and she still believed in the part of herself she had never been able to fully harden. That one day her family would surprise her. That one day her mother would look at her the way she looked at Victoria. That one day the table would have a seat at the center for her instead of at the edge where she could be easily ignored or easily excused when the conversation turned to people who actually mattered. She wore the dark green dress she had bought for herself last Christmas. The one she had never worn because there was never an occasion that felt right. She told herself tonight was the occasion. She told herself she deserved to show up looking like someone who had chosen herself. She almost believed it. The restaurant was on Michigan Avenue, one of those places with low lighting and crystal glasses and menus that didn't include prices, because if you had to ask, you weren't supposed to be there. Isabella had passed it dozens of times. She had never been inside. Her mother had chosen it. That alone told her the evening cost someone significant money. She found out whose money the moment she walked through the private dining room door. Adrian Blake was already seated. He was wearing the charcoal jacket she had given him for his birthday 2 years ago, the one she had saved for 3 months to buy, the one he had worn to meet her parents for the first time when he was still performing the version of himself designed to make families trust him. He looked good. That was the cruelest part. He looked relaxed and healthy, and completely unaffected by the 8 months that had passed since he disappeared from their shared apartment with a note on the kitchen counter that said, "Only, I can't do this anymore. I'm sorry." 8 words. 8 words after 4 years together. After an engagement. After she had reorganized her entire life around a future she thought they were building side by side. 8 words. And now he was sitting at her mother's dinner table, looking like a man who had made a sensible decision and had long since moved past it. Then Isabella saw the hand. His right hand was resting on the table, and next to it, fingers laced through his close enough to be a statement, was a hand she recognized better than almost anyone else's in the world. Victoria's hand. Her younger sister sat beside Adrian Blake like she had always belonged there, like the seat had been reserved for her specifically. Like this arrangement was not a betrayal, but simply the natural order of things finally correcting itself. Victoria was 29, 5 years younger than Isabella. She had their mother's cheekbones and their father's charm, and the particular kind of beauty that people described as effortless, which always meant that other people worked very hard so she didn't have to. She was wearing a ring. Not just any ring. The ring on Victoria's finger was the one Isabella had pointed to in a jewelry store window 18 months ago. The one she had shown Adrian laughing, saying she wasn't hinting, she was just saying if the question ever came up, that was the one. That exact one. The round solitaire with the delicate band. Isabella's ring, on Victoria's hand. Her mother stood from the table. "Isabella, darling, you look lovely. Come sit down." Isabella did not move. She stood at the entrance of that private dining room and looked at the table. Her mother. Her aunt. 2 of her mother's friends she recognized from the country club. Adrian. Victoria. A table full of people who had known this was coming. And none of them had warned her. "Sit down, sweetheart." Her mother pulled out the chair at the far end of the table. The one facing away from the room. The one where her back would be to the door. "We've been waiting for you." Isabella walked to the table. She did not sit down. "How long?" she asked. Her mother tilted her head. "Excuse me. How long have you known?" The table went quiet. Her aunt suddenly found something fascinating in her water glass. The country club friends exchanged a glance. Victoria lifted her chin. "Isabella." "I'm not talking to you yet." Isabella kept her eyes on her mother. "How long?" Patricia Carter had the kind of composure that came from decades of managing uncomfortable truths at garden parties and charity luncheons. She did not flinch. She did not look away. "A few months," she said. "We thought it was better to tell you in person. A few months." Isabella repeated the words carefully, the way you repeat something when you need time to decide if it's real. "You knew for a few months, while I was still coming to Sunday dinners. While I was still sitting at your table every week answering questions about whether I was seeing anyone, whether I was moving on, whether I was doing better. We were concerned about you. You were watching me." "Isabella." Her aunt's voice was soft, cautious. "This isn't— I would like everyone who is not my mother, my sister, or Adrian to please stop talking," Isabella said. The aunt stopped talking. Her mother straightened in her chair. Adrian, for the first time since she had entered the room, looked slightly uncomfortable. Good. She hoped the feeling lasted. "We should sit down," Victoria said. She had her mother's composure too, but thinner, newer, the kind that cracked under pressure because it hadn't been tested enough times to become real. "We can explain everything. I understand everything already." Isabella looked at her sister. "I'm trying to decide how I feel about it." "You're upset. That's understandable." "You're wearing my ring, Victoria." The table went absolutely silent. Victoria's composure thinned further. "It's not your ring. It was never. He showed it to me first." Isabella's voice was quiet and level, and more frightening than anger would have been. "In a store window on Wabash Avenue, on a Thursday afternoon in March. I remember the day because it was the first warm day after a long winter, and we had coffee afterward, and he told me he wanted to grow old with me. And then he pointed to that ring and asked me if I liked it." She looked at Adrian. "Do you remember that afternoon?" Adrian said nothing. "Do you remember what you told me?" Still nothing. "You said I was the only person who had ever made you feel like yourself." Isabella let that sit in the air for a moment. "You said you were done being afraid of good things." Her mother cleared her throat. "People change, sweetheart. Feelings are complicated, and I know feelings are complicated." Isabella turned back to her mother. "I am 34 years old. I am a grown woman. I understand that relationships end and people make new choices. I am not here to argue about Adrian's feelings." She paused. "I am here because you invited me to a dinner and didn't tell me what kind of dinner it was. Because you let me sit at your table for months and smile at me while you were keeping this secret. That is not complicated. That is a choice." Her mother held her gaze. "We were protecting you." "From what?" "From finding out badly." "This is badly, Mother." Isabella's voice finally broke not into tears, but into something rawer, something true. "This is a room full of people who already knew and a table set for a celebration I wasn't supposed to understand until I was already seated. This is badly." The silence that followed had weight. Adrian finally spoke. "Isabella." His voice had that particular warmth he used when he wanted someone to feel reasonable. She had watched him use it on difficult clients, on skeptical colleagues, on her every time she had tried to tell him something he didn't want to hear. "I know this is hard. I genuinely am sorry for the way things ended between us. But Victoria and I— Don't." Isabella held up one hand. "Don't explain Victoria and you to me. I don't need that explanation." "Then what do you need?" "An honest answer to one question." He spread his hands. Generous. Patient. The performance of a man with nothing to hide. "Did you leave me for her specifically? Was it already happening when you left?" The pause that followed was 3 seconds too long. Victoria spoke instead. "It wasn't planned. I asked him." Adrian shifted in his chair. "It's more complicated than— Then say it's complicated. Don't say no if the answer is yes. Another pause. And in that pause, Isabella had her answer. She had been replaced before she even knew she was being left. The 4 years she had spent building a life with this man had already been dismantled from the inside before she ever found his note on the kitchen counter. Every Sunday dinner since then, her mother had known. Every question about whether she was healing her mother had already known what had broken her and who had done it. The knowledge didn't collapse her. That surprised her. She had imagined this moment, the full reveal, the complete picture, and in every version she had imagined it destroyed her. She thought she would cry. She thought she would feel something catastrophic. Instead, she felt cold, cleanly, precisely cold. "I see," she said. "Isabella." Victoria's voice had shifted. Softer now, reaching. The voice of a sister who wanted to be forgiven before she had finished the thing that required forgiving. "I know how this looks. I need you to know that I never wanted to hurt you. I never— You're wearing my ring. It's not— Stop telling me it's not my ring." For the first time, Isabella raised her voice. Not screaming, not breaking, but sharp enough that the entire table stilled. "Stop rewriting what happened to make yourselves more comfortable. I am not asking you to feel guilty for the rest of your lives. I am asking you to let me name what this is without pretending I'm wrong about it." Victoria fell silent. Her mother reached across the table. "Isabella, don't touch me right now, please." Her mother's hand retreated. Adrian had been quiet for several minutes. Now he lifted his wine glass, took a measured sip, and set it back down. The gesture was so controlled, so deliberate, that it told Isabella everything she needed to know about how he had already decided to manage this evening. He had come prepared. "I'll marry your sister," he said, not as an apology, not as an admission, as a fact, as something already settled, as if stating it plainly enough would make the manner of its arrival irrelevant. "I'll marry Victoria. I hope eventually we can all move past this and be family." Family. He said the word like it was a reasonable offer, like he was extending something generous. Isabella looked around the table one final time. Her mother, who had chosen her younger daughter's happiness over her eldest's dignity without apparent conflict. Her sister, who wore the evidence of the betrayal on her left hand. The aunt. The family, friends. All the people who had smiled at her for months while knowing. Not one of them spoke. Not one of them said, "That's not right," or "You didn't deserve this," or even simply, "I'm sorry." And that more than Adrian, more than the ring, more than the note on the kitchen counter 8 months ago. That silence, that complete, comfortable, familiar silence, was what finally broke something open in Isabella Carter. Not broke it apart, broke it open. Like a door she had kept locked for 34 years had finally swung wide. She reached for her wine glass. She took one slow sip. She set it back down. And when she looked up, the expression on her face had changed. It wasn't grief. It wasn't anger. It was something quieter and far more dangerous. Resolution. "I'm not going to be angry tonight," she said. "I'm not going to make a scene, and I'm not going to sit here and perform forgiveness. I don't feel yet, because it makes everyone else at this table more comfortable." She pushed back her chair. "But I'm going to tell you something true." Everyone at the table was looking at her now. Completely. The way people look when they sense the temperature in a room has changed, and they haven't yet identified why. "I'm not alone," Isabella said. "I haven't been alone for a while, actually. And the man I'm with—" She let that land. "He knows exactly what this family did tonight. He knows exactly who I am. And he chose me anyway." She paused. "Without a ring that used to belong to someone else." Her mother's eyes narrowed slightly. "Isabella, don't make things up, too. His name is Luca Moretti." She said it quietly. The way you say a name when you don't need to shout it to make it felt. The effect was immediate. Her mother's expression froze mid-sentence. Her aunt's water glass stopped halfway to her lips. Victoria blinked, then blinked again, like her eyes needed a second pass to process what her ears had just received. And Adrian. Adrian set down his wine glass with a small involuntary sound of glass hitting table. The color changed in his face. Not dramatically, not theatrically, just left. As if the certainty that had carried him through this carefully staged evening had encountered something it had not prepared for and quietly decided to retreat. "Luca Moretti," he repeated. His voice had a new quality in it, something careful and controlled in a way it hadn't been before. "Yes, you're—" He stopped himself, reconsidered, started again. "You expect us to believe—" "I don't expect anything from you, Adrian. I stopped doing that 8 months ago. But Luca Moretti is— I know who he is." The table was completely still, because everyone in that room knew who Luca Moretti was. Chicago knew who Luca Moretti was. The name lived in that particular category of Chicago names that existed in two worlds simultaneously: the polished surface world of board memberships and charitable foundations and profile pieces in business magazines, and the world underneath that, the one that moved through shadows and settled disputes by methods that never appeared in any court filing. He was 40 years old. He ran an organization whose legitimate holdings alone placed him in the top tier of Chicago wealth. And the illegitimate holdings, the ones everyone quietly acknowledged without publicly naming, placed him somewhere else entirely. People did not challenge Luca Moretti. Not because they lacked the courage. Because they understood what happened to people who tried. "You're not with Luca Moretti," her mother said finally. Her voice had the thin quality of someone who wanted very much to believe something and was finding it harder than expected. "I didn't ask for your opinion on who I'm with." "Isabella." Victoria leaned forward. For the first time tonight, her sister looked genuinely shaken. Not performed. Actually shaken. "That's not— you can't just say something like that. That's not—" The restaurant door opened. Not the main entrance. The private dining room's own entrance, which was supposed to be accessible only to the party who had reserved it. The door opened, and the room that had been frozen in anxious, disbelieving silence became something different. It became the silence of people who have just understood at the same moment that the evening has moved beyond anything they planned for. Luca Moretti walked into the room. He was tall. Dark suit, no tie, the kind of presence that didn't require accessories to announce itself. He moved with the specific, unhurried quality of a man who had never in his adult life needed to hurry for anything, because the world around him had learned to adjust its pace to his. He was exactly who she had said he was, and he was walking directly toward her. Isabella's heart stopped, then restarted, because she had never met this man. She knew his name the way all of Chicago knew his name, from newspaper headlines and whispered conversations, and the particular way people's voices dropped when they discussed certain business arrangements that benefited from not being discussed at all. She had said his name because she was desperate and cornered, and because some deep, defiant, reckless part of her had needed to say something that couldn't be laughed off. She had not expected him to be real. She had not expected him to be here. She had absolutely not expected him to cross this dining room with that expression on his face, measured, deliberate, oddly calm, and stop directly beside her chair. "Sorry I'm late," he said. His voice was low and unhurried. The voice of a man who had arrived exactly when he intended to. He extended his hand. She looked at it. Every rational thought in her body told her this was impossible. This man did not know her. She had invented this. She had said his name as a bluff, as an act of desperate theater. And now somehow the bluff was standing beside her in a charcoal suit, and everyone at the table was looking at him with expressions ranging from disbelief to fear. She placed her hand in his. His grip was firm and warm and completely certain. Like he had been holding her hand for years. Her mother had gone pale. Victoria's mouth had opened slightly and not yet closed. Adrian was very still. Luca looked at the table. He took his time. He met each person's eyes in turn, her mother, her aunt, the family friends, Victoria, Adrian, with the kind of attention that made people feel they had been thoroughly and permanently noted. Then he looked at Adrian. "You're the one who left her," he said. It wasn't a question. Adrian said nothing. "I see," Luca said. The words were identical to the ones Isabella had used 10 minutes ago, but in his voice they carried an entirely different weight. He pulled back the chair beside Isabella and sat down, as if he intended to stay. as if this was simply the next thing he had planned to do this evening, and everything else in the room was secondary to it. "Is someone going to offer me a menu?" he said. "Or is this the kind of dinner where everyone stares?" The next 2 hours were unlike anything Isabella had ever experienced. Luca Moretti sat at her family's dinner table and was impeccably lethally polite. He answered questions with the minimum number of words required. He asked her mother about the reservation in a tone that somehow communicated he already knew how she had arranged the evening and found it interesting. He told her aunt, who had recovered enough to attempt small talk, that he preferred the north side of the city in autumn. He ate. He drank precisely 1 glass of wine. He did not explain himself. And that the complete absence of any explanation or justification for his presence was more unsettling to everyone at the table than anything he could have said. Because people who need to explain themselves are manageable. People who simply exist, completely assured of their right to exist in any room they choose to enter, are something else entirely. Adrian spoke exactly 3 sentences for the rest of the dinner. Victoria ate almost nothing. Isabella's mother smiled the rigid professional smile of a woman who had built her life on social competence and was encountering its ceiling. Twice during the meal, Isabella felt Luca glance at her, not obviously, not with the particular performance of a man playing a role, but with the quiet attention of someone checking on something that mattered to them. She couldn't explain how she knew the difference. She just did. When the table finally began to break apart, her aunt remembering a prior commitment, the family friends finding sudden reasons to leave, Isabella stood. Luca stood with her. Her mother touched her arm. "We should talk," Patricia said. Her voice had shed the social veneer. This was her real voice, the one Isabella heard in childhood when consequences were coming. "Isabella, we should really—" "I'll call you," Isabella said. She walked out. Luca walked beside her. The night air on Michigan Avenue was cold and clear. She walked half a block before she stopped. He stopped too. She turned to face him. "Why?" she said. He waited. "Why did you do that? Why did you walk in there? You don't know me. I said your name because I was—" She stopped, pressed her hands together, started again. "I said your name because I needed something that couldn't be dismissed. I didn't expect you to—" She gestured back toward the restaurant. "I don't understand why you did that." Luca looked at her for a moment. "Someone told me there was a woman in that dining room who needed something real to say," he said. She stared at him. "Who told you that? Does it matter?" "Yes." He almost smiled. "One of my people was at the bar. He called me." A pause. "I was a block away." "You were already here." "I was at a meeting across the street. I had no plans for this evening after 9. Isabella looked at him. "So you just walked in, because someone called you?" "Because the situation seemed worth my attention." "I am not a situation." "No," he agreed. "You're not." The word landed differently than she expected. She had been ready for condescension, for the particular brand of male generosity that was actually just ownership in a better-dressed coat, for the look that said "you're welcome." He didn't give her any of that. "You don't need to thank me," he said. "You don't need to explain yourself to me, and you don't owe me anything for tonight." "Then why?" "Because what happened in that room was wrong." His voice stayed level. It didn't rise into outrage or fall into pity. It just stated the thing plainly. What they did to you was wrong. The whole arrangement of it, the invitation, the revelation, the expectation that you would sit there and absorb it gracefully. He paused. Nobody should be cornered like that. She had been spoken to kindly before. She had been spoken to gently, carefully, with all the soft edges that people use when they want you to feel managed. This was different. He wasn't managing her. He was simply telling her what was true. And in the specific rawness of that evening, that distinction felt like the most generous thing anyone had offered her in years. "I need you to understand something," she said. "I need you to understand that I'm not going to become something you manage or protect or keep. I'm not looking to trade one situation for another." He held her gaze. "Understood. I mean it. I believe you. Then why do I feel like this isn't over?" He looked down the street. The traffic moved past them. The city continued its enormous indifferent business. "Because it isn't," he said. "You said my name tonight, Isabella. In a room full of people who are connected, whether they know it or not, to networks that pay very close attention to my name." He turned back to her. "That means certain people will hear about tonight before morning, and some of those people will be curious about you." The cold in the air felt slightly sharper. "What kind of curious?" "The kind that isn't friendly." She absorbed that. "So by trying to protect myself," she said slowly, "I may have put myself in danger. You stepped into a world that operates by different rules." "Your world." "Yes." She looked at him. "Are you going to tell me I made a mistake?" He considered that. "No," he said. "I'm going to tell you that the mistake was made long before tonight, by people who thought they could arrange your life without your consent." He paused. "Tonight, you simply started rearranging it back." Isabella stood on Michigan Avenue in the dark green dress she had worn for herself and looked at Luca Moretti, the man whose name had silenced a room, whose presence had rewritten an entire evening, who had walked into her crisis without being asked and without making it about himself, and felt something shift. Not toward him. Not yet. Not in any simple direction. Toward herself. Toward the version of herself who had walked into that restaurant tonight knowing something was wrong and gone anyway. Who had sat at that table and looked at the ring on her sister's hand and not collapsed. Who had said a name into the silence and meant it as defiance, and found impossibly that the defiance had been answered. "I should go home," she said. "I'll have someone drive you." "I can get my own cab." "I know you can." He reached into his jacket and produced a card. "Simple. Just a number. If anything unusual happens tonight or tomorrow, call that number." She took the card. She looked at it. She looked at him. "You could have just helped me make a scene tonight," she said. "You could have made it about power, about your name, about what you could do to people who disrespected you." She paused. "Why didn't you—" He was quiet for a moment. "Because this wasn't about me," he said. She nodded once. She flagged a cab. And as the cab pulled away into the Chicago night, Isabella Carter looked back once at the man standing on the sidewalk, hands in his pockets, watching her go with an expression she couldn't quite read, and understood that her life had just changed. Not because of a man, because she had finally stopped being afraid of what she deserved. The card in her hand was warm from his pocket. She didn't throw it away. She did not sleep that night. Not because she was afraid. Not because she was crying. She had expected both of those things, had braced for them, the way you brace for a wave you can see coming from a distance, and neither arrived. Instead, she lay in her apartment on the north side of the city and stared at the ceiling and felt something she hadn't felt in 8 months. Awake. Fully, completely, uncomfortably awake. Not in her body, but in her mind. Like a room that had been running on emergency lighting for a long time, had suddenly had its main power restored, and now every corner was visible, and she wasn't sure yet if she was glad about what the light was showing her. She picked up the card from her nightstand. Just a number. No name. No title. No indication of who it belonged to, which was itself a kind of statement, because a man whose name needed no introduction apparently saw no reason to write it down. She set the card back. She thought about the way he had looked at Adrian. Not with anger. Not with the particular performance of masculine threat she had seen from other men in other situations. Just looked. The way a person looks at something they've already evaluated and found to be significantly less than advertised. She thought about what he'd said on the sidewalk. Nobody should be cornered like that. Simple words. The kind of thing a decent person says. And yet, she had been sitting inside a family for 34 years, full of people who all considered themselves decent, and not one of them had said it. She put the card in her wallet at 3 in the morning. Then she finally slept. Her phone rang at 7:45. She looked at the screen. Her mother. She let it ring. It rang again 11 minutes later. Then Victoria. Then her mother again. Then a number she didn't recognize. She answered the unknown number because something in her chest told her she should. "Ms. Carter." A man's voice. Professional. Measured. "My name is Marco. I work for Mr. Moretti. He asked me to call and make sure last night didn't cause you any difficulties." She sat up. "What kind of difficulties?" "The kind that sometimes follow conversations that involve his name." She was quiet for a moment. "Nothing so far. My mother has called 3 times. That would be expected." A brief pause. "Mr. Moretti wanted you to know that if that changes, if anyone contacts you that you don't recognize, if anything feels off, the number on the card reaches him directly. Not me. Him." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because he asked me to." The call ended. She held the phone and looked out her window at the gray Chicago morning and understood with a clarity that surprised her that last night had not been an ending. It had been a beginning of something she hadn't chosen and couldn't yet fully see. Her mother called again at 8:15. This time, Isabella picked up. "Isabella." Patricia Carter's voice was precise in the way it got when she was managing something not warm, not cold, but calibrated. Exact. The voice of a woman conducting a situation rather than having a conversation. "We need to talk about last night." "Good morning, Mother." "Don't." A breath. "Don't be light about this. Do you understand what you did last night? Do you understand what saying that name in a room full of people means? I said the name of the man I'm with. You are not with Luca Moretti. You don't know that. Isabella." Her mother's voice dropped. The calibration broke slightly. Underneath it was something that might have been genuine fear, which Isabella found more interesting than the performance. "That man is dangerous. Whatever happened last night, whatever arrangement you made, or whatever conversation you had, you need to step back from it. You need to—" "I need to what?" "I need you to be careful. Now." Isabella's voice stayed even. "Now you need me to be careful. Not when you were planning an engagement dinner for my ex-fiancé and my sister. Not when you were deciding how to arrange an evening designed to present me with a fait accompli in front of an audience. Now when the consequence affects something you're afraid of, now you need me to be careful." Silence. "That's not fair," her mother said. "Which part?" Another silence. Longer. "He came to the dinner," her mother said finally. Her voice had shifted again, smaller now, stripped of its management. Just a woman saying a thing she found frightening. "He actually came. I didn't think he would actually come." "Neither did I," Isabella said honestly. "Then how did he—" "I don't know all of it yet." "Isabella." Her mother's voice had gone very quiet. "Who is this man to you, really?" And Isabella, who was 34 years old, who had spent the night awake with a business card in her hand, who had watched Luca Moretti sit at her family's table and consume exactly 1 glass of wine, with the composure of a man who owned every room he entered, took a breath. "He's someone who showed up," she said. "That's more than I can say for most people." She ended the call. She made coffee. And then she called the number on the card. It rang once. "Isabella." He answered on the first ring and used her name immediately, which meant he had saved her number, which meant something she didn't entirely know how to categorize yet. "My mother is frightened," she said. "That's reasonable. She thinks I'm in danger. She's not entirely wrong. I need you to tell me what that means." She stood at her kitchen window with the coffee in her hand. "Not vaguely, not carefully. I need you to actually tell me what's happening and what I should expect, because I don't function well in the dark, and I am not going to be managed." A pause. "Can you meet me this morning?" "Where?" He named a coffee shop on the near north side, the kind of place that was crowded enough for privacy where nobody paid attention to the people at the next table, because they were too absorbed in their own conversations. 45 minutes, he said. "Fine," she said. She hung up, drank her coffee, got dressed in the first clean thing she found, and was there in 38. Howe was already at his back corner table when she arrived. No suit today. Dark jacket, open collar, a coffee in front of him that looked like it had been sitting there long enough to lose its steam. He looked like a man who had not slept but was too accustomed to that condition to let it show. She sat across from him. "My mother called 4 times," she said, skipping hello entirely. My sister hasn't called yet, which tells me she's either ashamed or she's been told not to. And someone named Marco called me at 7:45 this morning. Marco works for me. His voice was level. I had him call because I didn't know if reaching out directly this morning would feel like pressure. She studied him. Why does that matter to you? Because last night was already enough to navigate. I didn't want to add to it. That's thoughtful, she said. And she meant it without softness, the way you say something true when you're still deciding what to do with it. He wrapped both hands around his coffee cup. There's something you need to understand about what happened last night, he said. Not about your family, about my world. Tell me. My name has a specific weight in certain circles. When it's connected to a person publicly in front of witnesses, that person becomes visible to people who spend a great deal of time watching me, tracking who I'm associated with, who might be important to me. He paused. You understand what I'm saying. I become a point of leverage. Something shifted in his expression. Brief. Almost invisible. Yes. Because if someone wanted to pressure you, they would look at the people closest to me. That's always the method. He looked at her steadily. You said my name in front of Adrian Blake. She felt the temperature of the conversation change. What do you know about Adrian? Enough. Luca set down his cup. His firm has a financial relationship with a man named Richard Voss. Commercial real estate on the surface. Other things underneath. Voss and I have had significant disagreements over the past 18 months. What kind of disagreements? The kind that involve territory and money, and the fact that Voss believes certain arrangements in this city should be rearranged in his favor. Isabella was quiet for a moment. Processing. So Adrian isn't just my ex-fiancé who made a selfish decision, she said slowly. I don't know how much he's aware of, Luca said. He may be a selfish man who happened to land in the orbit of someone dangerous. Or he may know exactly who he works adjacent to and what that means. He paused. But Voss will hear that your name was connected to mine, and he'll want to know who you are. The weight of it settled around her. This is because I said your name. This is because of what your family set in motion before you ever walked into that restaurant, he said. I want to be precise about that. You didn't create this situation. You inherited it. She looked at him across the small table. Why are you telling me all of this? You could have had Marco call me, tell me to keep a low profile, and that could be the end of it. Your name was used, the situation is contained, everybody moves on. He held her gaze. Because I sat at that table for 2 hours last night, and I watched what your family did to you. His voice didn't change in volume or heat. It stayed exactly level, which made it more impactful, not less. And I watched how you handled it. And I have been in this business for 20 years, and I can read people, Isabella. It's one of the primary skills required for surviving as long as I have. What did you read? Someone who has spent a very long time being underestimated, he said, and who is finished with it. She felt something move in her chest. Not romance, not gratitude, something older and more foundational. The sensation of being accurately seen. She forced herself to stay practical. What do you need from me? Nothing, he said. She blinked. Nothing. I'm not asking you for anything in exchange for last night or for this conversation. I want to be clear about that. He leaned back slightly. What I would ask, not require ask, is that you let me know if anyone contacts you that you don't recognize. If Adrian calls. If anyone asks questions about your relationship to me. Because you want to monitor the situation. Because I want to protect you from consequences you didn't ask for. There's a difference between those two things. Yes, he said. There is. She turned her coffee cup in her hands. My mother thinks I made a terrible mistake last night. What do you think? I think I made the only move available to me in that moment. She looked up. I think I would do it again. Something moved in his face. Quiet. Almost private. Then we're in the same position, he said. They sat in that coffee shop for another 40 minutes. She asked him questions, and he answered them, not all of them, not the ones that crossed into territory. He wasn't prepared to share with someone he had known for less than 12 hours, but enough. He told her about Voss's operation in broad strokes. He told her what to watch for. He told her that the people most likely to approach her would be professional and pleasant, and would not announce themselves as threats. She listened. She didn't take notes because she retained things. It was something people were always surprised by, as if they assumed that a woman who had been overlooked her entire life had also failed to develop competence. She asked him once, "Have you done this before? Walked into a stranger's crisis?" He was quiet for a beat. "No," he said. "Why this time?" He looked at her. "Because Marco called me and described a woman who was outnumbered in a room full of people who should have protected her and didn't." A pause. "That specific situation." He stopped. Something crossed his face that she couldn't quite name. "I have personal reasons for finding that particular situation intolerable." She didn't push. Some things deserved the space they asked for. When they left the coffee shop, he walked her to the corner. The city moved around them, cabs, pedestrians, the particular morning energy of Chicago, in the kind of fall that hadn't yet committed to being cold. "One more thing," she said. He waited. "Adrian is going to talk. My mother is going to talk. By tonight, everyone in their circle is going to know that you showed up at that dinner." She looked at him directly. "That means people are going to have opinions about me, about us, about what last night was." "Yes." "Are you prepared for that?" He looked at her with an expression that held something she was starting to recognize, that quality of being thoroughly unintimidated by the thing in front of him. "Isabella," he said, "I've been prepared for things considerably more challenging than other people's opinions." She almost smiled. "I'll be in touch," she said. "I know," he said. She walked away. She did not look back this time, but she heard him stay at that corner for a moment before his footsteps moved in the opposite direction, and she found that she was aware of exactly how long those footsteps lasted before the sound of the city swallowed them entirely. 3 days passed. They were not quiet days. Her phone rang constantly. Family friends who had heard versions of the story that grew more elaborate with each retelling, colleagues who asked careful questions that were actually fishing expeditions. Her aunt who called twice a day with the particular persistence of someone who had appointed herself a bridge between Isabella and her mother. Victoria did not call. That absence was its own kind of statement. Isabella had expected it. She wasn't sure yet whether she felt relieved or hurt by it. Both things were true. Simultaneously, the way feelings often were, when the person involved was someone you had loved your whole life and were only now beginning to see clearly. Adrian called once. She picked up because she wanted to hear what version of himself he would perform. "Isabella." His voice was the careful one, the managing one. "I've been thinking about you. I wanted to make sure you're okay." "I'm fine." "Last night was 3 days ago." "Right." A brief recalibration. "I've been thinking about it since then. About some of the things that were said. About—" He paused. "About Moretti." There it was. "What about him, Isabella?" His voice dropped. Something moved through it that she might once have interpreted as genuine concern, and now read as something else entirely. "That man is not someone you should be connected to. Whatever happened, however this started, you need to understand who he is and what being near him means for your life." "Adrian." Her voice was pleasant. "You left me 8 months ago with a note on the kitchen counter. You've been with my sister since before you left. You staged an engagement dinner specifically to deliver that information in a setting where I couldn't respond freely." She paused. "I don't believe you're calling because you're worried about my life." Silence. "What are you actually calling about?" More silence. Longer. "Voss wants to know about you," he said finally. And just like that, the performance ended. She sat very still. "Say that again." "Richard Voss. He heard about the dinner. He has people, Isabella. He heard that you and Moretti were—" "Who told him?" "It doesn't matter who." "Adrian." Her voice sharpened. "Who told him?" A long, ugly pause. "He has people at these kinds of restaurants," Adrian said. "They report things. It's just how he operates. I didn't tell him. I want you to know that. I didn't. What does he want to know? How serious it is. Whether Moretti is actually invested in you, or whether it was a one-time thing. Adrian's voice had changed completely now. Gone was the careful warmth. What remained was thinner, more exposed. He thinks if Moretti actually cares about you, you might be useful. The word landed like a stone in still water. Useful. He said that. He implied it. And you called me to tell me this because I don't want you to get hurt. The words came quickly, like he'd been saving them. Whatever I did, whatever happened with Victoria, I don't want you in the middle of something dangerous because of me, because of my associations. Your associations, she repeated. Isabella. How long have you been working with Voss? Silence. Adrian. How long? It's not working with, it's... How long? He exhaled. 2 years, he said. 2 years. She did the arithmetic. Their engagement had been announced 2.5 years ago. She had spent the last 2 years of their relationship living beside a man who was already embedded in the orbit of someone who was actively in conflict with a man she had not yet met. The symmetry of it was almost architectural. You need to call Moretti, Adrian said. Tell him what I told you. Tell him Voss is asking questions. He needs to know. Why? Because you're safer if Moretti is prepared. And why do you want me to be safer? Another pause. This one different from the others. Less calculating. More like something breaking through the calculation. Because I wasn't a good person in how I handled things, he said. And this is the one thing I can actually do. She sat with that for a moment. Thank you for calling, she said. She ended the call. She picked up the card. She dialed. He answered on the second ring this time. Adrian just called me, she said. A beat. Tell me. She told him everything. Verbatim. She had a precise memory for conversations. Another skill people underestimated in her, and she gave him each detail in the order it had arrived. Voss's name. The restaurant having observers. The word useful. 2 years. Luca listened without interrupting. When she finished, there was a silence that felt less like emptiness and more like something being processed at a very high speed. Are you somewhere safe right now? He asked. I'm in my apartment. Stay there. I'm sending Marco. Luca. She used his name for the first time without thinking about it and registered the fact that it had happened and set that aside for later. I'm not going into hiding. I'm not asking you to hide. I'm asking you to wait 30 minutes so I can send someone who can tell you in person what the next steps look like. A pause. Can you do that? She considered. 30 minutes, she said. 25, he said. Marco arrived in 22. I was younger than she'd expected from the voice on the phone, mid-30s, compact with the particular kind of stillness that suggested a person who spent significant time being very watchful and very quiet. He declined coffee. He sat in her living room and looked at her with the same assessing quality she'd noticed in Luca, and understood it now as something trained rather than natural, the practiced attention of people who could not afford to be surprised. Mr. Moretti wants you to know that Voss's interest changes things, Marco said. Not dangerously, but significantly. What does significantly mean? It means we'd like to be more present, more attentive. You mean I'd have people watching me? People nearby, he said carefully. For a limited time, until we understand what Voss actually intends. She looked at him. What does Moretti actually want from this? She asked. Not what he's told me. What does he actually want? Be straight with me. Marco held her gaze for a moment. Then, he wants you not to become a casualty of something that wasn't your situation to begin with. That's the same answer he gave me. Because it's the true answer. People don't do things without reasons. Mr. Moretti has reasons, Marco said. He hasn't shared all of them with me, but I've worked for him for 7 years, and I can tell you that what I see in how he's handling this is not standard operating procedure. He paused. He doesn't get involved in situations like this. He doesn't... Marco stopped himself, reconsidered. He showed up to that dinner. Yes. He doesn't do that. She felt the weight of that land. Why did he? She asked. I think that's a question for him, Marco said. She called him that evening. Not about strategy, not about Voss or Adrian or logistics. Marco said you don't usually do what you did at that restaurant, she said. A long pause. Marco talks too much. He was being honest with me. I appreciate that. She settled into her couch. Why did you really come? The pause this time was different. Not the pause of someone calculating what to reveal. The pause of someone deciding whether to be vulnerable, which was a different thing entirely. My mother, he said finally. She waited. She was in a situation very similar to yours, when I was young. People who should have protected her didn't. People who should have spoken up stayed quiet. His voice was unchanged on the surface. Below the surface, she was getting better at reading what lived below the surface. Something moved. I was a child. There was nothing I could do. And last night? Last night I wasn't a child, he said. And there was something I could do. She sat with that for a long time. I'm sorry about your mother, she said. She survived it. A brief pause. She's one of the strongest people I know. Is she still? She lives in Italy now. She's well. Something shifted in his voice, marginally softer. She would like you, I think. Isabella didn't know what to do with that. She decided to leave it where it was and come back to it later. Voss is going to make a move, she said. Whatever he's planning, it's not going to stay at the level of asking questions. No, Luca agreed. It's not. What happens when it escalates? Then we deal with it. We. The word sat between them. Small. Significant. The kind of word that carries a great deal of weight in proportion to its size. You didn't choose this, he said. But you're in it. That means you're not in it alone. I need you to understand that I won't be managed, she said. Not by my mother, not by Adrian, not by you. If I'm in this, I'm in it as a person who makes her own decisions. I know that. Say it like you mean it. A pause. Then, you are the most clear-eyed person I have been in a room with in years. The last thing I would try to do is manage you. Something in her chest settled. Not completely, not into comfort, but into something that felt like the first solid ground she had found in a very long time. Then tell me what comes next, she said. Voss will want to meet you, Luca said. He'll find a way to arrange it so it looks accidental. He'll want to take your measure. He paused. When that happens, and it will happen, I need you to let me know immediately. And if he approaches me before I can, then be exactly who you are. His voice was certain. Because whoever you are is more than sufficient. She almost laughed. You say that like you know me. I know enough, he said. I know what you did in that restaurant with nothing but a name and your own nerve. Another pause. I know that most people in your position with your resources in that moment would have collapsed. I thought about it. But you didn't. No, she said. I didn't. The silence between them this time was different from the earlier ones, not filled with strategy or information, or the careful architecture of two people figuring out how to trust each other. Just present, settled, like the kind of quiet that has earned itself. Get some sleep, he said. Tomorrow will be its own thing. You too. I'll try. He said it with the tone of a man who had largely given up on sleep as a reliable event. She hung up. She sat in her apartment in the dark for a while. Outside somewhere on the street below, a car sat with its engine running that had not been there this morning. She noticed it without fear. She understood what it meant. He had people watching her building. She hadn't asked him to. He hadn't told her he would. He had simply done it. And the woman who had spent 34 years being left out of every room that mattered found that she did not resent the protection. She thought about what Marco had said. He doesn't do that. She thought about a man who had been a child once watching his mother be cornered by people who should have known better, unable to do anything. And then she thought about a man who was no longer a child with every resource the city had to offer at his disposal, who heard about a woman sitting alone in a restaurant full of people who were supposed to love her, and drove 1 block, and walked through a door. The car outside her building stayed all night. She slept better than she had in 8 months. She met Richard Voss on a Tuesday, not because he arranged it, not because Luca predicted it, because Isabella arranged it herself. That was the part nobody expected. She had spent the 4 days after Marco's visit doing what she always did when she needed to understand something she researched. She read everything publicly available about Richard Voss. Business filings, real estate acquisitions, the charitable foundation that existed in the way charitable foundations sometimes exist primarily as a surface for other things. She read the board memberships and the press profiles and the careful, flattering profiles in local business publications that described a self-made man with vision and community commitment. Then she read between the lines. The acquisitions that appeared just after certain zoning decisions. The partnerships that formed and dissolved in patterns too deliberate to be coincidence. The names that appeared alongside Voss's in footnotes and subsidiary filings, names that appeared elsewhere in contexts that had nothing to do with real estate. She called Luca on the 4th evening. "I want to meet Voss," she said. The silence that followed had a particular quality. "No," he said. "That wasn't a request for permission. Isabella, I have done the research. I understand who he is and how he operates and what he wants from this situation." She kept her voice level. "And I think I am more useful in a room with him than I am sitting in my apartment while your people watch the street outside my building. You're not trained for—" "I'm trained for exactly this," she said. "I have spent 34 years managing rooms full of people who underestimate me. That is the most relevant skill set available here." A longer silence. "Tell me what you're thinking," he said. She told him. How was quiet for the entire explanation. She had learned in the week since the restaurant that Luca's silences were not passive, they were active, working the sound of a precise mind processing information at significant speed and not wasting words on the interim steps. When she finished, he said, "If anything feels wrong, I call Marco. You call me." She noted the difference. "All right," she said. "Isabella." His voice shifted slightly. Not softer exactly, something adjacent to softer. "You don't have to do this." "I know I don't have to," she said. "That's why I want to." She called Voss's office the next morning and identified herself as Isabella Carter. Told his assistant she was a colleague of Adrian Blake's who had been hoping to connect with Mr. Voss about a possible introduction. The assistant put her on hold for 40 seconds. When she came back, she offered Isabella a lunch appointment for the following Tuesday at a restaurant in the Loop. She said yes. She did not tell her mother. She did not tell Victoria. She did not tell Adrian, though she suspected that within 24 hours of her call to Voss's office, Adrian would know she had made it. That was fine. That was actually useful. She told Luca. He agreed immediately, she said. He would. Luca's voice was tight in a way she was starting to recognize. The way it got when he was managing something he didn't like. "He's been waiting for an opening. You just gave him one. I gave him what he wanted, so he'd give me what I need." "Which is?" "His face when I say things he doesn't expect," she said. "People like Voss, people who spend their entire lives being the most powerful person in every room. They don't know what to do when the person across the table isn't afraid of them. They become readable." Another silence. "You've dealt with people like him before," Luca said. It wasn't a question. "My mother is a version of the same thing," Isabella said. "Smaller scale, same architecture." Something moved in his voice that might in a different context have been the beginning of a laugh. "Be careful," he said. "Always," she said. The lunch was at a restaurant she had never been to, at a table near the back that had clearly been reserved specifically because it offered sightlines to the entrance while remaining itself less visible. She noticed that immediately. She had arrived 8 minutes early and positioned herself so that she could see him enter. Richard Voss was 62 years old. He looked younger in the way men with serious money and serious power often do not, because they age well, but because the ordinary stresses of ordinary life never touch them, And it's the ordinary stresses that carve people's faces early. He was polished. Pleasant smile. The handshake of a man who had practiced handshakes. He wore his confidence the way expensive suits are worn, like it had been custom-fitted and cost more than it appeared to. Ms. Carter. He sat across from her and settled into the chair with the ease of a man in his own territory. I have to say, when my assistant told me you'd called, I was intrigued. I hoped you would be. You're direct. I appreciate that. He opened his menu, glanced at it, set it down. A man who already knew what he wanted. Adrian speaks well of you. Adrian speaks well of everyone, Isabella said. It's one of his more consistent qualities. Voss smiled at that. The smile reached his eyes in the practiced way of someone who had trained himself to make it reach his eyes. How is he? I'm sure you know better than I do how he is, she said pleasantly. The smile didn't change, but something behind it sharpened. You're also honest, he said. Even better. I find it saves time. Then let's save time. He leaned back slightly. You're connected to Luca Moretti. Yes. How connected? She looked at him with the particular expression she had practiced in her bathroom mirror that morning. Open, composed, slightly amused, as if the question was interesting rather than consequential. Connected enough that his name in a room full of people produces the effect it produced last week. I heard about the dinner. He said it casually, like it was minor. It wasn't minor, and they both knew it. Interesting evening by all accounts. It was clarifying, Isabella said. In what way? In the way that evenings are clarifying when you discover that the people you expected to protect you have chosen other priorities. Something shifted in Voss's expression. Small but real. She had said something that landed somewhere personal. She filed that away. And Moretti was there to... He paused delicately. To make a point, she said. The point was made. The point being that you are under his protection. The point being that I am not without resources. He studied her across the table. She let him study her. She had nothing in her face she was afraid of him seeing. Ms. Carter, he said, may I be direct with you? Please. Luca Moretti is a significant force in this city. He's also a man whose methods and business practices create complications for people who operate in adjacent spaces. He paused. I have been dealing with those complications for some time. I'm aware of that. A beat. Are you? I did research before this lunch, she said. I wouldn't sit across from someone I didn't understand. And what do you understand about me? She looked at him steadily. That you're a man who prefers to negotiate before he escalates. That you're here because I'm an unknown variable in a situation you've been calculating carefully. And that you'd like to know whether I'm an asset or a liability before you decide how to proceed. She paused. How am I doing? Voss was quiet for a full 3 seconds. Then he laughed. A genuine sound. Brief and surprised. Remarkably well, he said. Then let me save us both time, Isabella said. I'm not going to become a point of leverage against Luca. That's not a loyalty statement, it's a practical one. He's significantly more capable than you of managing consequences, and I have no interest in being on the losing side of that equation. Voss's smile thinned slightly. You're confident about which side loses. I'm confident about what the research shows, she said. And I'm confident that you're here because you're uncertain, and uncertain people don't start wars, they probe for information. This lunch is a probe. You're very sure of yourself. I've been underestimated my entire life, she said. I'm making up for lost time. Something moved across Voss's face in that moment that she hadn't expected. Not anger, not the recalibration of a man encountering an obstacle. Something more complicated. Something that looked briefly like respect. What do you want from this lunch? He asked, specifically. I wanted to meet you, she said simply. I wanted to understand who you are in person rather than on paper. And I wanted you to understand that whatever assumptions you made about me based on my family's connection to Adrian, those assumptions are incorrect. What assumptions should I make instead? That I am an independent person who makes independent decisions, she said. And that the best outcome for everyone involved is a situation where the people I care about are not in the middle of your disagreements with Luca. Voss looked at her for a long moment. You're negotiating, he said. I'm clarifying, she said. There's a difference. He picked up his water glass, took a measured sip, set it back down with the deliberate quality of a man resetting himself. Adrian is not as central to my operations as you may believe, he said carefully. I believe Adrian is a man who got in over his head and is now managing the consequences one phone call at a time, Isabella said. I feel some sympathy for that, but it's not my problem to solve. And your sister? She held his gaze. My sister made choices. She'll live with them. You're not angry. I'm finished, she said. There's a difference. The lunch lasted another 40 minutes, Voss ordered. They talked not about Luca, not about Adrian, but around those subjects in the way that sophisticated people circle the thing they actually want to discuss while testing whether the other person is sophisticated enough to follow the circles. She followed every one. She led several. When it ended and they stood to leave, Voss held out his hand. Ms. Carter, he said, I came to this lunch expecting a woman who was either naive or ambitious in the specific way that makes people exploitable. He paused. I was wrong on both counts. Most people are, she said. About me. She shook his hand. She walked out. She was half a block from the restaurant when her phone rang. Luca. How did it go? He asked. He's not going to make a move against me, she said. Not directly. He's recalibrating. You're sure? He shook my hand on the way out and told me he'd been wrong about me. She kept walking. Men like Voss don't say that unless they mean it. It's too much of a concession otherwise. A pause. What did you say to him? The truth, she said. Carefully arranged. She heard something in the silence that followed, that she was starting to be able to identify the particular quality of Luca's attention when he was genuinely surprised and was deciding whether to show it. Come have dinner with me, he said. She stopped walking, not because she was uncertain, because she wanted to notice the moment. The specific feeling of standing on a street in Chicago on a Tuesday afternoon in October, having just walked out of a room that was supposed to contain her and chosen instead to contain herself, and being asked by a man she had known for 8 days to come, have dinner. All right, she said. He cooked. She hadn't expected that. She had expected a restaurant, another controlled environment professional, and managed. Instead, Marco picked her up and drove her to a building on the near north side and brought her up in an elevator to the top floor and left her at the door. Luca opened it. Howe was in dark trousers and a gray shirt with the sleeves pushed up, and something about the informality of it, the absence of the suit, the absence of the whole constructed exterior that she associated with him, made him look younger, more real. The apartment smelled like garlic and something slow-cooked and wine. You cook, she said. My mother taught me, he said. She said no one should depend entirely on other people for the things they can learn themselves. She stepped inside. The apartment was large and spare in the way of spaces where a person actually lives rather than performs living. Books. A worn leather chair near the window that had the look of a place someone spent significant time. A jacket thrown over the back of a couch that suggested he had arrived home not long before she had. She sat at the kitchen table while he finished the meal. They talked. Not about Voss. Not about Adrian. Not about strategy or consequence, or the complicated architecture of the situation they were both now standing inside. They talked the way people talk when they are beginning to trust each other, and the trust feels both fragile and more solid than anything they have recently stood on. She told him about the foundation she had been building for 2 years. A small organization she funded herself, still modest, designed to help women in financial crisis rebuild the practical foundations of independent life. Housing resources, legal aid connections, financial literacy workshops. She had started it after the engagement ended in the months when she was trying to understand what she wanted to build, now that she was building for herself alone. He listened with the full quality of attention she had noticed in him from the beginning. Not waiting for her to finish so he could speak. Actually listening. You've been doing this for 2 years, he said. Yes. While working full-time? Yes. While going through... He paused. While going through everything, she said. Yes. He was quiet for a moment. Most people in the middle of their own crisis contract. They focus inward. They stop. I couldn't afford to stop, she said. I tried it for about 2 weeks after he left, and it made everything worse. So I started something bigger than myself, and I kept moving. He poured wine into her glass. What does the foundation need? He said. She looked at him. That's not why I told you about it. I know that. His voice was patient. I'm asking because it's a real question. You want to help fund it. I want to know what it needs. Luca. She set down her glass. I'm not going to take money from you. Not now. Not while... She gestured at the general situation surrounding them. Not while things are what they are. Why not? Because I need it to be mine. Mine, she said. Fully mine. I need to know that every part of what I built. He looked at her across the table. I understand that, he said. And she believed him. They ate. He had made something with braised short ribs and root vegetables that was the kind of meal people only make when they have time and intention, the kind that cannot be rushed. She told him he was a better cook than she had expected, given that he ran a criminal organization. He told her the two skills were not as unrelated as she might think. Both required patience, timing, and knowing when to apply heat. She laughed. It surprised her, not because she hadn't laughed in months, but because of how natural it felt. How unperformed. He smiled watching her laugh. A real smile this time. Not the small controlled thing she had seen at the restaurant 10 days ago. This one reached his eyes and changed his whole face. It was the first time she had seen him look happy. She filed that away in the same place she had been filing everything about him, the part of herself that was paying very close attention, and had been since the moment he extended his hand in a private dining room and said, "Sorry I'm late," like he had been expected. After dinner, they sat near the window with their wine, and the conversation slowed into something more comfortable, and she told him about her father, who had died when she was 19, quietly, before she had learned how to have the harder conversations with him. Who had been the parent who looked at her the way she needed to be looked at. Whose absence had left a space in the family that her mother had filled with practicality, and her sister with charm, and Isabella with the particular brand of self-reliance that looks like independence from the outside and feels like isolation from the inside. Luca didn't say he was sorry. He didn't offer the rote consolation that made grief performative. He just nodded like someone who understood loss in a language that went past words. "Tell me about your father," she said. His jaw tightened, slightly. "He was not a good man," he said. She waited. "How was the reason my mother needed to survive something," he said. "And when she did, when she finally got out, he spent years trying to reassemble the power he had over her through other means." He paused. People like that don't stop because they're wrong. They stop because someone makes it impossible to continue. "You made it impossible," she said. He looked at her. "When I was 23 years old, yes." She understood suddenly, with the specific clarity that comes when a fact you already held connects to a truth you had not fully assembled, that Luca Moretti's world had not begun with ambition. It had begun with protection. With the specific determination of a young man who had watched something terrible happen to someone he loved and had decided he would build something powerful enough that it could never happen again. The empire was not the point. The empire was the armor. "You could have done something else," she said carefully. "With that same drive. You could have..." "I know," he said. "I made choices." He held her gaze. "I'm not apologizing for them, but I know what they cost." "What did they cost?" I was quiet for a moment. "The ability to trust anyone fully," he said. "The ability to let people close without calculating the risk." He paused. "For a long time I thought that was acceptable, that it was simply the price. And now?" He looked at her. "Now I'm less certain," he said. The thing that was growing between them, the specific electricity that had been building since the moment he extended his hand in a restaurant, and she took it without entirely understanding why, expanded in that moment into something that couldn't be misnamed anymore. She felt it. He felt it. They both held very still. And then her phone rang. She looked at the screen. Adrian. She answered it because something in the way he was calling repeatedly, the notification showing 3 missed calls she had silenced during dinner, told her it wasn't nothing. Isabella. His voice was different. The management was gone. What remained was something raw and stripped, frightened. I need you to listen to me. I'm listening. Voss knows about the lunch. He knows you. He knows that you told Moretti about the lunch afterward. A breath. He has someone close to Moretti, someone inside. She went very still. She looked at Luca across the table. How do you know? She asked. Because he told me, Adrian said. He told me tonight. He's been testing whether Moretti knows there's a leak, and he used your lunch to do it. He gave you something small, something he could track, something he knew you'd pass back. She ran the lunch through her memory. Fast. Every exchange, every carefully arranged truth. What had he said that was specific? What had she repeated? She had told Luca that Voss was recalibrating, that he'd said he was wrong about her. That wasn't the thing. The thing was something else. A specific detail about Adrian's role that Voss had offered her as a concession. That Adrian was not central to his operations. That he was peripheral. She had told Luca that. Isabella. Adrian's voice tightened. He knows someone passed it back. He's using that to find the leak. But the problem is, he thinks the leak is Marco. Marco, she said. He's going to move against him, Adrian said. Tonight. Isabella, you need to tell Moretti right now tonight because Voss is... How do I know this isn't another test? She said. Silence. How do I know you're not the one Voss sent to test me this time? A long, wretched pause. You don't, Adrian said. You can't, I know that. But I'm telling you because it's true, and because I am tired of being the person I've been. His voice broke on that. Just slightly. Just enough. I am genuinely tired of it. She ended the call. She looked at Luca. There may be a problem with Marco, she said. She watched his face change, not into panic, not into anger, into something harder and colder, and completely focused the specific expression of a man who had survived 20 years in a dangerous world by being faster and more precise than the things coming at him. He was already reaching for his phone. Tell me, he said. She told him everything. Adrian's call word for word. The detail she had passed back. The suggestion that Marco was being framed or implicated. The fact that she couldn't be certain Adrian wasn't Voss's instrument in this too. Luca made one call, said 3 words in Italian, ended it. He looked at her. Marco is fine, he said. I have eyes on him. But someone in my organization has been passing information to Voss, he said. That part is true. I've suspected it for 6 weeks. He paused. Tonight may have narrowed the field significantly. Because whoever Voss is protecting is now visible by what they don't know, Luca said. I compartmentalize information deliberately. Different people know different details. If Voss identified the specific detail you passed back... He stopped. Something moved across his face. I know who it is. Who? He looked at her. His name is Daniel Reese, he said. He's been with me for 4 years. The weight of that settled over both of them. 4 years. The specific ache of betrayal from someone with proximity and time. I'm sorry, she said. He absorbed that. Don't be, he said. This needed to be found. He paused. What I'm more concerned with is what this tells us about Voss's next move. He used the lunch to surface a leak, she said. But the leak is not what he actually cares about. No. He cares about you. Yes. And now he knows that I'm not incidental to you. She held his gaze. The lunch was not just a probe. He was watching how you responded to what I told you. He was measuring. Luca was quiet for a moment. Then, he's going to use you, he said. Not as leverage, as a mirror. He's going to find a way to put you in the middle of something and watch how I respond, so he knows how much I'm willing to risk. To find out if I matter to you enough to make you reckless. Yes. The word sat between them, exactly as heavy as it was. She looked at him across the table with the remnants of dinner and 2 wine glasses and the specific intimacy of a conversation that had moved them both from strangers to something she didn't yet have a word for. "Does he have his answer?" she asked. Luca met her eyes. "Yes," he said. "He does." She felt the full weight of that land in her chest, not as a burden, as something she had chosen. "Then we have a problem," she said. "Yes," he said. "We do." "What are we going to do about it?" He leaned forward. "We're going to be smarter than him," he said. "We?" she said. He looked at her steadily. "I told you. You're not in this alone." "That was before tonight," she said. "Before he knew." "That changes the tactics," Luca said. "It doesn't change the answer." She held his gaze for a long moment. "I want to be clear about something," she said. "What happened between us tonight, this—" She gestured at the space between them, the conversation and the dinner and the honesty and all of it. "This is real. This is not strategy. I am not with you because of what you can protect me from. I know that. I need you to say it like you believe it." He leaned forward and took her hand. Not dramatically, not with the particular performance of a man making a gesture. Simply took it. Like it was the most natural extension of the evening they had just had. "I believe it," he said, "because you are the only person who has sat across from me in years and told me the truth and not wanted anything in return for it." She looked at their hands. She thought about a woman who had walked into a restaurant 10 days ago in a dark green dress wearing it for herself, and sat at a table full of people who had already decided what she was worth. She thought about what had happened since. She thought about the specific feeling of choosing. "All right," she said. "So we're smarter than him." "Yes." "Tell me how." And Luca Moretti, the most dangerous man in Chicago, the man whose empire was built on the specific promise that no one would ever again be allowed to corner the people he loved, leaned forward across the table and began to tell her. The plan was simple in the way that only the most dangerous plans are simple. They would give Voss exactly what he was looking for: the appearance of a crack. Luca laid it out across the kitchen table with the specific clarity of a man who had spent 20 years thinking 3 moves ahead of every person in every room. He spoke quickly and precisely, and Isabella listened, the way she always listened, completely retaining everything, asking the questions that cut directly to the places he had left imprecise. Daniel Reese would not be confronted. Not yet. He would be fed a piece of information carefully constructed, verifiable enough to be credible, specific enough to be trackable. If it reached Voss within 48 hours, the confirmation was complete. If Voss moved on the information, they would know exactly what he intended and be positioned ahead of it. "And if he doesn't move on it?" Isabella asked. "Then we learn that Voss is more patient than I've estimated," Luca said, "which is itself useful." "What's the information?" He looked at her. "That I'm pulling resources back from the West Side consolidation because of a problem with a city contract. That I'm exposed for approximately 3 weeks. "Are you actually exposed?" "No," he said. "But Reese will believe it because he's been watching that consolidation for months, and the contract issue is real. It just resolved 2 weeks ago. He doesn't know that yet." She studied him across the table. "You've been planning this for longer than tonight," she said. "I've been planning the leak identification for 6 weeks," he said. "Tonight gave me the final piece." "I gave you the final piece." He held her gaze. "Yes." She sat with that for a moment. The fact that she had walked into a lunch with Richard Voss and walked back out with information that solved a 6-week problem, not because Luca had sent her, but because she had decided for herself that being active was better than being protected. "What do you need me to do?" she asked. "Nothing," he said. She gave him a look. "I mean it," he said. "This part doesn't involve you. You've already done the thing that mattered. The lunch, and the call from Adrian." He paused. "And the fact that you sat across from Voss and made him believe you were a woman navigating a personal situation rather than a woman gathering intelligence." "I was navigating a personal situation," she said. "I was also gathering intelligence." "Yes," he said. Both things simultaneously. That is, he stopped. What exceptionally rare, he said. In my experience. She didn't let herself be moved by that. She filed it alongside everything else she was filing and stayed focused. When does the next part happen? She asked. 48 hours. And Reese? Handled after the confirmation, he said. Quietly, efficiently. He'll be removed from proximity to anything sensitive and managed legally where possible. He paused. I don't destroy people for being corruptible. I remove them from the opportunity. That's more merciful than I expected. I'm not unmerciful, he said. I'm precise. She looked at him across the table. What happens to Voss? The expression that crossed his face then was the most complicated she had seen from him. Not anger, not calculation, something older. The expression of a man who had spent 2 decades being very good at a particular kind of response and was standing at the edge of choosing a different one. That depends on what he does next, Luca said. She didn't push further. Some decisions needed their own space to resolve. She went home that night with Marco driving and the city sliding past the windows and her mind running at the specific speed it reached when something important was in motion. She thought about Voss's face at the lunch, that brief, genuine moment of surprise. She thought about Adrian's voice on the phone stripped of its management saying, I am genuinely tired of it. She thought about Luca at his kitchen table, sleeves pushed up, talking about his mother. She thought about what it meant to be in the middle of something this large. She wasn't afraid. That surprised her every time she checked. She arrived home to find Victoria sitting in the hallway outside her apartment door. Her sister looked like someone who had been crying, and then stopped, and then started again, and then stopped. Her hair was not as composed as usual. Her jacket was the kind you grabbed instead of the kind you chose. She stood when Isabella came off the elevator. I know I should have called, Victoria said. Yes, Isabella said. You should have. Will you let me in anyway? Isabella looked at her sister for a long moment. The woman who had been her closest companion for 29 years and her most complicated wound for the last 8 months. The woman wearing the ring. The woman who had sat at that table and reached for Adrian's hand in a way that made it clear it wasn't the first time. She unlocked the door. Come in, she said. Victoria sat on the couch and held her hands in her lap and looked at the floor with the specific posture of someone who has rehearsed what they plan to say and now cannot find the beginning of it. Isabella sat across from her and waited. Adrian told me about Voss, Victoria said finally. He told me tonight. About what Voss actually does, about what he's been involved in. She looked up. I didn't know. I want you to know that. I knew Adrian worked with him in some capacity, but I didn't know the full picture. And now you do. And now I'm... Victoria stopped. Her voice had a fracture in it. I'm sitting here understanding that I left my sister alone with a broken heart, so I could be with a man who I did not know as well as I thought I did. Her jaw tightened. And that the person who has always known what she was doing always is you. It's always been you. Victoria, no. Her sister shook her head. Let me say this, please. A breath. Our whole lives, Mom treated you like the capable one who didn't need things. Like you were self-sufficient in a way that made needing something a character flaw. And I let her do that because it meant I got more attention. I was a child who needed attention, and I took it without thinking about what it cost you. She looked at Isabella directly. And then I wasn't a child anymore, and I kept doing it anyway. The room was very quiet. Do you love him? Isabella asked. Actually. Victoria was quiet for a moment. I thought I did, she said. I think I loved the feeling of being chosen by someone who had chosen you first. I think I confused that for something real. Her voice went smaller. That's a terrible thing to say. It's an honest thing to say. I don't want to marry him, Victoria said. I've been sitting with that for 3 weeks, and I keep hoping I'll feel differently, and I don't. A pause. I don't love him. I think I wanted to prove I could have the thing you had, and I... She stopped. I didn't think about the fact that the thing you had wasn't what it appeared to be. None of it was what it appeared to be, Isabella said. No. They sat with that. You're with Moretti, Victoria said. Not accusing, not performing shock, just naming a fact she was holding carefully. Yes. Is he? Victoria paused. Is he good to you? The question was so simple and so direct and so entirely different from any question her family had asked her, about any man in any previous conversation, that Isabella felt it move somewhere deep. Yes, she said. He is. Victoria nodded slowly. Then I'm glad, she said. They stayed like that for a while. Two sisters in an apartment at 11 at night, finding the shape of something they had broken and were only now beginning to understand could be rebuilt not into what it was, but into something more honest. Something chosen, rather than inherited. When Victoria left, she stopped at the door. The ring, she said. She held out her left hand. The round solitaire caught the light. I don't want it. Then give it back to him, Isabella said. I thought... Victoria hesitated. I thought maybe you'd want... No, Isabella said clearly. I don't want it. I never wanted that specific ring. I wanted what I thought it represented. She looked at her sister. I'm building something different now. Victoria closed her hand, nodded, left. Isabella stood alone in her apartment and felt the particular weight of a night that had carried more emotional mass than most months. She felt tired in the way that comes after something true happens, not depleted, but thoroughly wrung. Like every surface had been washed clean and needed time to dry. She texted Luca. Victoria was here. I'm fine. Talk tomorrow. His response came within 40 seconds. Good. Sleep. She did. The 48 hours that followed were the strangest of Isabella's recent life, because they were quiet on the surface and volcanic underneath. She went to work. She ate. She called her aunt, who was the family member she trusted most, to be honest, and had a conversation that was the first genuinely unmanaged exchange she had had with any member of her family in longer than she could accurately remember. Her aunt said, Your mother is ashamed of herself. She won't say it, but I know her face. She doesn't need to say it to me, Isabella said. She needs to say it to herself. Yes, her aunt agreed. She does. She didn't call her mother. She left that for when she was ready, and readiness, she had decided, was something she would determine for herself without a timeline imposed by anyone else's discomfort. On the morning of the second day, Luca called. It moved, he said. She knew what that meant. Reese passed it. Within 31 hours. His voice had the flat quality it got when something unpleasant was confirmed, and he was processing the specific weight of having been right about something he'd hoped he was wrong about. Voss received it last night. He made 3 calls before midnight. He moved on it. He redirected 2 significant resources toward the west side, Luca said. Preemptively. He thought he had a window. A pause. He doesn't. What happens now? Now Reese is removed from any access by end of day. He paused. And Voss has committed resources based on false intelligence. When the consolidation proceeds on schedule, which it will, because there is no actual delay, he'll understand that he was played. He'll know it came from me, she said. The lunch. Yes. She absorbed that. He won't be pleased. No, Luca said. He won't. Is that a problem? Voss angry is a Voss who makes mistakes, Luca said. Voss who makes mistakes is a Voss who becomes visible, and Voss visible is manageable, she said. Precisely. She heard something shift in his voice. What aren't you telling me? She asked. A pause. Voss made a 4th call last night, he said. After the 3 I mentioned. To whom? Your mother. The air in the room changed. He called my mother. They have a connection I wasn't aware of, Luca said. Through the country club board. 2 years of shared committees. He paused. I don't believe Patricia Carter knows the full nature of Voss's business, but I believe Voss called her last night to probe how much she knows about your relationship to me. Isabella stood up from her chair, walked to the window. The city below was doing its ordinary morning business, entirely unaware of the extraordinary thing she had just been told. He's going to use my family, she said. He's going to try, Luca said. Your mother is susceptible to flattery from powerful men, Isabella said, and terrified of looking unsophisticated. If Voss plays it correctly, she'll tell him whatever he asks without understanding she's telling him anything at all. That's my assessment also. I need to talk to her. Isabella. I know it's complicated, and I know you'd prefer I stay out of the direct. I was going to say be careful, he said, not don't go. She stopped. Oh, she said. She's your mother, he said. That's not a tactical calculation. That's a human situation. Handle it as such. A pause. Just know what you're walking into. I always know what I'm walking into, she said. Yes, he said. You do. She called Patricia Carter and told her she was coming over. She didn't ask. Her mother received the call with the careful warmth that meant she had been thinking about how this conversation would eventually happen and had been rehearsing it. Isabella was at her mother's house within the hour. Patricia opened the door and looked at her daughter for a moment before she spoke. And in that moment, the unguarded second before the social competence reasserted itself, Isabella saw what her aunt had described. Shame. Real and unperformed and apparently ongoing. Come in, her mother said. They sat in the front room. The formal one, not the kitchen. Her mother was performing this visit as a serious occasion, which meant she understood its weight. Someone called you 2 nights ago, Isabella said. Richard Voss. Her mother's expression shifted. How did you? It doesn't matter how. He called you. What did he want to know? Patricia sat with her hands folded in her lap. The posture of someone deciding how much of the truth to offer. He asked about you, she said, and about Moretti. How serious it was. Whether you were, she stopped. Whether I was what? Whether you were stable, her mother said. Whether you were making good decisions. He framed it as concern. Her voice had gone quieter. He made it seem like he was asking because he worried about you. And you believed him. Her mother looked down at her hands. I wanted to. What did you tell him? I told him. Patricia stopped. Her jaw tightened. I told him that I wasn't sure. That things had been difficult since the engagement ended. That you had always been, that you handled things on your own, and sometimes that independence. She stopped again. Her voice had gone very quiet. I told him you were capable but emotionally vulnerable, Isabella said. Her mother looked up. Yes. The single word sat in the room. You told a stranger, Isabella said, that I was emotionally vulnerable, to a man you met through a country club board. I didn't know what he was. You didn't ask. Her mother absorbed that. No, she said. I didn't. He's not a concerned family acquaintance, Mother. He is a man in direct conflict with Luca, and the information you gave him was designed to tell him whether I could be used against someone I care about. Patricia Carter had maintained her composure through a great deal in her life. Through her husband's death, through financial uncertainty she had carefully never disclosed to her daughters, through social situations that had required enormous amounts of managed grace. But something in her face shifted now in a way that composure couldn't hold. I didn't know, she said. I know you didn't know. Isabella's voice was not unkind. It was exact. But I need you to understand that there are consequences to decisions made without asking the questions that matter. You've spent 34 years making decisions about me without asking the questions that matter. And now a man who means me harm has information about my emotional state that you handed him over what I imagine was a very pleasant phone call. Her mother was quiet for a long time. I'm sorry, she said. Not managed, not performed, just said. Isabella looked at her mother, this woman who had loved her children in the only way she had known how, which was insufficiently, which was not the same as not at all. I know, Isabella said. I believe you. What do I do? Patricia asked. If he calls again? Tell him nothing. Tell him you don't discuss your daughter's life with acquaintances. And if he persists in any way, you call me immediately. All right. And if he contacts you through the board through any shared channel, I'll call you. Yes. Her mother looked at her with the particular expression of a woman who is realizing across a very short distance of time that the daughter she had categorized as capable and therefore untending had become the person she needed to tend toward. Is he good to you? Patricia asked. The exact same question Victoria had asked. Moretti. Isabella thought about braised short ribs and the conversation by the window, and a man who had spent 20 years building an empire out of the specific need to never again be helpless in the face of something wrong. Yes, she said. He is. Her mother nodded. Once. Something settling. Then I'm glad, she said. The same words. Two women 29 years apart arriving at the same sentence. Isabella went home. She called Luca from the car. My mother will be careful, she said. She understands what she told him, and she won't do it again. How did she take it? Better than I expected. A pause. She apologized. Did you believe her? Yes, Isabella said. I did. She looked out the window at the city moving past. She's not a villain, Luca. She's a woman who learned a limited way of loving and applied it fully. That's different. He was quiet for a moment. You're more generous than I would be. I'm her daughter, Isabella said. That earns her a version of the truth rather than a verdict. He didn't respond to that immediately. She could feel him thinking. What you just did, he said. Going to her, the conversation you had. Yes. That took more courage than the lunch with Voss, he said. She sat with that. Voss couldn't hurt me, she said. Not really. Not in the way that matters. A pause. My mother could. Yes, he said. Exactly. But I went anyway. Yes, he said. You did. The car moved through the city, and she held the phone and felt something she didn't have a precise word for. The sensation of being known accurately by someone who had been paying the right kind of attention. What happens with Voss next? She asked. He'll realize within the next 72 hours that the West Side information was false, Luca said. When he does, he'll have to decide whether to escalate or absorb the loss. What does escalating look like? A direct move against one of my operations, public enough to be visible, aggressive enough to require a response. And if he absorbs it, then he's signaling that he understands the score and is choosing to recalibrate, Luca said. Which means this particular conflict ends not with a confrontation, but with an acknowledgement. Which do you think he'll choose? A pause. I think Voss is fundamentally a rational actor, Luca said. I think he escalated with the leak because he believed he had better information than he did. Now that he knows he doesn't, he stopped. I think he'll absorb. And Daniel Reese. Already gone, Luca said. By noon today. Everything sensitive has been compartmentalized away from anything he touched. A pause. He'll find that certain professional doors in this city are no longer available to him. That's sufficient. Sufficient, she repeated. I told you, I'm not unmerciful, I'm precise. I know, she said. I believe you. The 72 hours that followed were the first truly quiet ones in 3 weeks. Voss did not escalate. On the third day after the false information was discovered, Luca received a communication, not a call, not a meeting. A single line delivered through a mutual legal intermediary that indicated Voss was withdrawing resources from the West Side and requesting a formal boundary discussion through appropriate channels. He was standing down, not surrendering. Men like Voss never surrendered. But acknowledging with the specific language that these situations used, that the current arrangement was not productive and that a renegotiated understanding was preferable to a continued conflict. Luca told her that evening. She was at his apartment. She had been there 3 times in the past week. Each visit slightly more settled than the last, slightly more like a place she recognized, and she put down her tea and looked at him. It's over, she said. This version of it, he said. Voss will always be a consideration, but the immediate threat is resolved. Because he decided it wasn't worth it. Because he discovered that the position he thought he had was not the position he actually had. Luca looked at her steadily. You changed the math, significantly. The lunch, the conversation with your mother, The call from Adrian that you handled without panicking and turned into actionable intelligence. He paused. You did those things. She picked her tea back up. I did them because they were the right moves, she said. Not because I was trying to help your situation. I know that, he said. That's what made them effective. She looked at him across the room. The man who had walked into her crisis on a block away and decided it was worth his time. Who had cooked her dinner and told her about his mother and held her hand across a kitchen table and meant it. What happens now? She asked. He came and sat beside her. Close. The specific proximity of someone who has decided to stop maintaining a distance. Now, he said, we figure out what this is. We already know what this is, she said. Yes, he agreed. We do. She looked at him. I'm not going to make this simple, she said. I'm not going to be easy or uncomplicated or always available. I have a foundation to build, and a family that requires more maintenance than it should, and my own life that was already in progress before any of this. I know, he said. And I'm not going to perform gratitude for what you did at that restaurant, she said. You did it because it was right, not because I owed you something. I know that too. And I won't be managed or protected without being consulted or kept outside the Isabella. His voice was quiet. She stopped. I know all of this, he said. I've known all of this since the first night you stood on Michigan Avenue and told me who you were. A pause. I'm not asking you to be different than you are. I'm not capable of wanting someone different than you are. He looked at her directly. What I'm asking is considerably simpler. What are you asking? To be in this, he said. Whatever this is, with you. As it actually develops, not as either of us plans it. She sat with that. You've never done that before, she said. Let something develop without planning it. No, he said. I haven't. Why now? He looked at her with the expression she had filed away on the first night, the small, almost invisible thing that had moved in his face when she stood her ground, and she understood suddenly that she had been watching it grow for 3 weeks into something fully legible. Because I met someone who is more interesting than my plans, he said. She felt the warmth of that move through her, not as a conclusion, as a beginning. She reached out and took his hand, the way he had taken hers at the kitchen table, simply without drama, like the most natural extension of everything that had preceded it. All right, she said. We're in this. He looked at their hands. Something moved in his face that she had only seen once before, that full, unguarded version of his smile, the one that changed everything. Yes, he said. We are. 3 months after the engagement dinner that was supposed to break her. Isabella Carter stood in the conference room on the 14th floor of a building in the Loop and watched 12 women walk through the door she had opened for them. Not metaphorically. An actual door. An actual room. An actual program that had taken 2 years of her evenings and weekends, and every dollar she had been able to carve out of a life she had been rebuilding one deliberate choice at a time. The Carter Foundation's first formal cohort. 12 women in various stages of starting over. Some had left marriages. Some had lost jobs. Some had been in the specific language of their intake forms, in situations where the people around them had decided their value and found it insufficient. They ranged in age from 26 to 61. They came from different neighborhoods, different backgrounds, different versions of the particular story that brought a woman to the point of needing to rebuild from almost nothing. Isabella stood at the front of that room and looked at each of them and felt something move in her chest that she hadn't felt since before Adrian left. Since before the note on the kitchen counter. Since before the 8 months of grinding, quiet reconstruction that had preceded everything that came after. Purpose. Clean and full and entirely her own. She said, I'm not going to tell you this is going to be easy. I'm not going to tell you that there's a version of this process that doesn't require more from you than seems fair. What I'm going to tell you is that every resource in this room, legal, financial, housing professional, exists because someone decided you deserved access to it. And that someone was you. You filled out the application. You walked through the door. Everything that follows is yours. The room was quiet. A woman in the second row. 53 years old, recently separated, had spent 22 years raising children for a man who left. When the youngest started college, pressed her lips together and nodded like she was physically receiving the words and needed her body to confirm them. Isabella understood that nod completely. After the session, she called Luca from the car. "First cohort started today," she said. "How did it go?" His voice had the particular quality it held now when she told him about the foundation focused and genuinely interested the attention of a man who understood that this was the thing she had built herself and treated it accordingly. 12 women, she said. Every single one of them looked at me like they needed permission to believe things could be different. What did you tell them? That the permission was theirs already. She paused. They just needed someone to confirm it. He was quiet for a moment. That's what you needed, he said. Yes, she said. It is. And now you give it to other people. That's the idea. She heard something in his end of the line that she had become fluent in over the past 3 months, the specific quality of his silence when he was moved and was deciding whether to say so. Come over tonight, he said. I'll cook. You cook every time I come over. I like cooking for you, she smiled. I'll be there at 7. She was there at 6:45. He noticed. He always noticed. He said nothing about it, just opened the door with that particular version of his expression, the one that had started small and guarded on the night of the restaurant, and had over 3 months of evenings and conversations, and the specific intimacy of two people learning each other without performance become something so open it still occasionally surprised her. Over dinner she told him about the woman in the second row, the 53-year-old, the nod. Luca listened. He asked questions, not perfunctory ones, not the questions of a person performing interest, but the questions of someone who had been paying close enough attention to know which details mattered. What does she need most? He said. Practically. Housing stability and employment re-entry, Isabella said. She's been out of the workforce for 18 years. Her skills are real, but her resume has a gap that most hiring managers use as an excuse. I know 3 people who would not use it as an excuse, he said. I'll make calls. Luca. Not as a favor to you, he said. As the right thing to do. He held her gaze. Let me. She looked at him across the table. In the beginning, she had been precise about the boundary. The foundation was hers, fully. Hers, built without his money, or his influence, or any of the weight that came with being connected to a man whose name rearranged rooms. She had held that line firmly, and he had respected it without argument, which had itself told her something important about who he was. But this was different. This was not his money. It was his attention. His genuine willingness to look at a problem and apply what he had to it, not to own the solution, but to contribute to it. She understood the difference. 3 calls, she said. That's all. 3 calls, he agreed. And you tell me who you're calling before you call them. Of course. And if she doesn't want the connection, we respect that. Completely. She looked at him. You're a complicated man, she said. You've always known that. I know, she said. I'm saying it affectionately. He smiled, the full version. After dinner, she sat beside him on the couch with a glass of wine and her feet tucked under her, and said the thing she had been carrying for 3 days. Adrian called me. Luca stilled. When? Wednesday. I didn't tell you because I wanted to process it first. She looked at him. He's ending things with Victoria. Luca was quiet. She ended it, Isabella clarified. He's framing it as mutual. It wasn't mutual. She gave him the ring back 2 weeks ago, and he's been trying to reframe it ever since. How do you feel about that? I feel sad for her, Isabella said. Not for him. Not for what she lost, but for the fact that she spent months of her life in a situation that was never what she told herself it was. She paused. And I feel not satisfied. I want to be clear that I don't feel satisfied. What do you feel? She considered. Finished, she said. The way a chapter feels finished when it ends. Not happy, not vengeful. Just closed. He nodded slowly. And Adrian himself. He's leaving Chicago, she said. He told me on the call. He's taking a position in Seattle. Fresh start, he said. She paused. I told him I hoped he found one. I meant it. Luca looked at her. You meant it, he said. I meant it. She held his gaze. I spent a long time thinking anger was the appropriate response to what he did. And I was angry genuinely. But anger as a permanent residence is expensive. You pay for it with the space it occupies. She paused. I'd rather use that space for something worth building. He held her gaze with the specific attention that told her he was not just hearing the words, but receiving them somewhere real. My father never understood that, he said. He carried his grievances like they were assets, like the weight of them made him more substantial. Did they? They made him heavier, Luca said. Not more substantial. There's a difference. Yes, she said. There is. She leaned her head against his shoulder. He adjusted to accommodate her without making it a moment, just shifted naturally, like two people who had been doing this long enough to have found the right configuration. Victoria wants to have dinner, Isabella said. The three of us. Her and me and you. She felt him absorb that. Why the three of us? He said. Because she wants to know you. The real version, not the name in the room. Isabella paused. And because I think she needs to see that what I have is real. That it wasn't a desperate bluff that happened to work out. That I chose this, and it chose me back. He was quiet for a moment. When, he said. Next week if you're available. I'll make myself available. She lifted her head to look at him. You don't have to, Isabella. His voice was patient and certain. She's your sister. That makes her someone I want to know. He held her gaze. Stop waiting for me to treat the things that matter to you as obligations. She felt that land. Old habit, she said. I know, he said. We're working on it. The dinner with Victoria happened on a Thursday. It was at a restaurant. Isabella chose her territory. Her decision. No private dining rooms and no staged revelations. Just a table for three at a place she liked on the north side, where the food was good and the lighting was honest, and nobody would recognize Luca and perform around him. He arrived exactly on time. Not early, not late. Exactly on time, which she had learned was itself a statement, a deliberate one from a man whose time was the most controlled resource in his life. Victoria was already there. She had arrived 8 minutes early, which was her anxiety visible. She stood when Luca arrived and shook his hand with the composed, slightly over-prepared quality of someone who had rehearsed this moment and was hoping the rehearsal held. Victoria, he said, I've heard a great deal about you. Good things, Victoria said. Her voice had the slight crack of someone genuinely uncertain. Complicated things, Luca said. Honestly told. Victoria blinked. Then, unexpectedly, she laughed. A real sound. Something releasing. That's fair, she said. That's actually very fair. They sat. The dinner unfolded with the specific texture of three people navigating new territory with care. Victoria asked Luca questions that Isabella could tell had been prepared in advance. Not interrogation, but genuine effort to understand who he was beyond the reputation. He answered them with the same directness he gave everything, no performance, no deflection, no attempt to manage her impression. When Victoria asked, "How did you know at the restaurant that night that she was worth walking into that room for?" Luca looked at Isabella briefly, then back at Victoria. "I didn't know," he said. "Marco described a situation. I made a decision." He paused. The knowing came after. "What did you know after?" "That the woman in that room was the most precise person I had encountered in years," he said, "and that she was surrounded by people who had mistaken her precision for something they didn't need to worry about." He paused. "That specific mistake is the one I find least tolerable." Victoria held his gaze for a moment. "Because of your mother," she said. Isabella looked at her sister. "I told her," Isabella said quietly. "I hope that's all right." "It's all right," Luca said. Victoria nodded slowly. "I'm sorry," she said to him. For the part I played in the situation that brought you all into the same room." She paused. "I know that's not a sufficient—" "It's sufficient," he said. People make choices that they later understand differently. What matters is the understanding. Victoria looked at him. Something in her face settled. "You're not what I expected," she said. "What did you expect?" "Something more." She searched for the word. "Threatening." "I'm only threatening to people who threaten things I care about," he said. The silence that followed was warm rather than heavy. Isabella looked across the table at her sister and the man beside her, and felt the specific fullness of a moment she had not permitted herself to imagine during the 8 months of quiet reconstruction. Not because she had stopped believing in the possibility of it, but because she had been too focused on building the foundation of herself to look up and see what might be waiting. She had stopped looking. And somehow, by stopping looking, she had stopped missing it. And somehow, by stopping missing it, she had been free to actually find it. After dinner, Victoria and Isabella walked out together while Luca took a call. The two sisters stood on the sidewalk in the October cold, and Victoria looked at her. "He looks at you," Victoria said. "What?" "When you're talking. When you're looking somewhere else. He looks at you the way—" She stopped. "The way someone looks when they can't quite believe they found the thing they were looking for." Isabella looked down the street. "He said I was the most interesting thing that had happened to his plans in years," she said. Victoria laughed softly. "That's very him somehow, based on 20 minutes. "It is," Isabella agreed. "Are you happy?" Victoria asked. Simply, directly, the way sisters ask when they mean it. Isabella thought about it with the honesty the question deserved. "I'm more than happy," she said. "I'm full. I feel full. Like every part of my life is actually occupied by things I chose." She paused. "That's new?" Victoria nodded. "Good," she said. Her voice was firm and genuine. "You deserve full." The twist came 6 days later. Not from Voss. Not from Adrian. Not from any of the directions Isabella had been watching. It came from a journalist, a woman named Catherine Hale, investigative reporter for a Chicago publication with a significant readership and a reputation for thorough, unsparing profiles of powerful figures in the city's business and criminal landscape. She reached out through the Foundation's contact email, professional direct, identifying herself fully, and requested an interview with Isabella Carter about her connection to Luca Moretti. Not about the Foundation. About Luca. Isabella read the email 3 times. Then she called Luca. "Catherine Hale," she said. A pause. "She's been working on a profile of me for 7 months," he said. "I'm aware of her. She contacted me through the Foundation email." The pause this time was different. "She found the Foundation," he said. "It's not hidden," Isabella said. "It's public. That was always the plan." She held the phone. "She wants to interview me about my connection to you." "Don't do it," he said. "Tell me why." "Because Hale is thorough, and she's honest, and she will print exactly what you say," he said. "Which means anything you say about me becomes part of a public record in a profile that will be read by everyone," she said. "Yes. Including people who might reconsider their relationship with the Foundation because of it." "Yes." She sat with that. "And if I don't speak to her?" "She prints what she has," he said. "Which is substantial. 7 months of research. Is any of it wrong?" He was quiet. "Luca, is any of it wrong?" "The framing may be incomplete in places," he said carefully. "The facts are largely accurate." "Then she should print it," Isabella said. "Isabella, I'm not going to ask you to manage what a journalist writes about your actual life," she said. "And I'm not going to hide mine." She paused. "But I need to know, is there anything in what she has that would genuinely harm you, not embarrass, not complicate, harm?" I was quiet for a long time. "No," he said. "Then I'm going to meet with her," Isabella said. "Not to talk about you, to talk about myself, to talk about the Foundation and what it's doing and who I am independent of anyone else's story." She paused. "If she asks about you, I'll tell her what's true and what's mine to tell. Which is, that I know you, that I trust you, that the man I know is more complicated and more human than the reputation, and that the reputation was built in response to something real. She paused. I'm not going to defend everything you've done. I'm going to tell the truth about who you are to me. His silence lasted longer than any before it. You understand what that does, he said finally. Publicly connecting yourself to me. I'm already connected to you, she said. Publicly. The dinner saw to that. She paused. I'd rather be connected on my own terms. He exhaled. I can't talk you out of this, he said. No. I know. And then, will you tell me what you plan to say before you say it? Yes, she said. Of course. All right. All right. She had expected more resistance. She had prepared for it. You know what you're doing, he said. You have always known what you're doing. I stopped being surprised by that approximately 72 hours after I met you. She felt warmth move through her. I'll send you a draft of my talking points tonight, she said. Send them tomorrow, he said. You should sleep first. I'm not tired. You've been running since 7 this morning, he said. You're tired. You're just running too fast to feel it. She paused. How do you know what time I started this morning? Marco mentioned you called him at 7:15. You have Marco reporting my schedule to you. Marco mentioned it in passing, he said, because he was impressed. She shook her head. Good night, Luca. Good night, Isabella. She met with Catherine Hale the following week. A coffee shop 2 hours a journalist who was exactly as thorough and honest as Luca had described, who asked hard questions with the particular directness of someone who respected her subject enough not to offer soft versions. Hale asked about the foundation. She asked about Isabella's career. She asked about the engagement dinner, and Isabella answered that with the precision of someone who had lived it fully and had nothing to perform about it. Then she asked about Luca. Tell me what you want people to understand about him, Hale said. Not what the file says, what you know. Isabella looked at her. He is a man who built something very large out of the specific need to never again be helpless in the face of something wrong, she said. Everything he's done, the good and the complicated, and the parts that don't look clean from the outside, comes from that center. She paused. I'm not asking anyone to excuse the complicated parts. I'm asking people to understand that they don't exist in isolation from the human being they came from. And the human being he is to you, Hale said. Isabella was quiet for a moment. He showed up, she said, when it mattered, when nobody else did. She paused. And then he kept showing up, not because I needed rescuing, because he chose to be there. She looked at Hale directly. That is the rarest thing I have ever encountered in another person. Hale wrote it down. The profile ran 4 weeks later. It was long. It was thorough. It was, as Luca had predicted, completely accurate in its facts and more complete in its framing than the previous versions of his story that had circulated over the years. It included Isabella's words verbatim. It described the foundation and its work in 3 careful paragraphs. It named Isabella Carter as a person of note, independent of her connection to Moretti, which had been the thing Hale had told her privately over the second coffee that she had found most interesting. I came looking for the woman behind the man, Hale had said. What I found was a woman in front of her own story. The morning the profile ran, Isabella's phone began ringing at 8. Her foundation email received 43 messages by noon. 27 of them were from women asking about the program. 11 were from potential donors. 3 were from journalists who wanted to follow up. 2 were from women who had read the foundation description and written long, careful paragraphs about situations they were in that sounded word for word like the ones Isabella had designed the program to address. She sat at her kitchen table and read every single one. Then she called Luca. The foundation email, she said. I saw the profile, he said. 43 messages, 27 program inquiries. A pause. Isabella. His voice had the quality it got when something moved him, and he was not trying to contain it. I know, she said. I know. She heard him exhale. You built something real, he said. We're building something real, she said. I am. It's mine. But it's real. Yes, he said. It is. Her mother called that afternoon. Patricia Carter called and said, I read the profile. I know, Isabella said. You were... Her mother's voice had the particular texture of someone choosing words with unusual care. You were remarkable in it. I was honest in it. That's the same thing, her mother said. Isabella let that land. The foundation work, Patricia said. I didn't know. I mean, I knew you were doing something, but I didn't understand the scope. You didn't ask, Isabella said, gently, without accusation, just as a fact. No, her mother said. I didn't. A pause. Can I now? Isabella looked out her window. Yes, mother, she said. You can. They talked for 40 minutes. The longest, genuinely honest conversation they had had in Isabella's memory. Her mother asked questions and actually waited for the answers. She asked about the cohort, about the woman in the second row, about the legal aid partnerships and the housing resources and the financial literacy workshops that Isabella had researched and built and sourced over 2 years of evenings when she could have been doing something easier. At the end, her mother said, I want to help, if you'll let me. What kind of help? The country club board has a philanthropy committee, Patricia said. I chair it. A pause. I would like to present the foundation as a grant candidate at the next meeting. Isabella was quiet. You chair the philanthropy committee, she said. I have for 6 years, her mother said. I've never used it for something that actually mattered to me. The sentence landed with the full weight of a woman seeing herself clearly, possibly for the first time. Send me the grant specifications, Isabella said. I'll have a proposal ready. She heard her mother exhale. Thank you, Patricia said. Don't thank me, Isabella said. Submit the application like any other candidate. Of course, her mother said. Of course. When she hung up, Isabella sat in the quiet for a moment. She thought about the woman she had been 4 months ago, standing at the entrance of a private dining room in a dark green dress she had bought for herself, looking at a table full of people who had already decided what she was worth. She thought about what she had done since then. She thought about 12 women in a conference room, about 43 emails, about a journalist who had come looking for the woman behind a man and found a woman in front of her own story. She thought about a man who had walked 1 block and changed the entire trajectory of the evening, who had said, sorry I'm late, like he had been expected, who had sat at a terrible table with perfect composure and then walked her out into the cold and said, nobody should be cornered like that, who had cooked for her and told her about his mother and held her hand across a kitchen table and meant it every time. She picked up her phone. Are you busy? She said when he answered. I'm always busy, he said. I'm never too busy. I want to say something to you. All right. She had not planned this. She had not rehearsed it. It came from the same place that had said his name in a restaurant full of people, the place that acted when the right moment arrived and trusted itself to find the words. I spent a very long time being the woman in the room that nobody looked at, she said. Not because I was invisible, because I had learned to make myself small enough that being invisible felt like safety. She paused. I was safe, and I was completely alone inside it. He said nothing, listening fully. You walked into a room and you looked at me, she said. Not at the situation, not at the name I said or what it could mean for you. At me. She stopped. I don't know if you understand what that cost me to receive, how unfamiliar it was, how long it took me to stop waiting for you to stop seeing me. I'm not going to stop seeing you, he said. I know that now, she said. That's what I'm saying. I know it now. The silence between them was the fullest she had ever heard. I love you, she said. I wanted to say it clearly and without any performance around it. I love you. He was quiet for 3 seconds. Not the silence of uncertainty. The silence of a man receiving something he had been careful not to expect and was now allowing himself to fully hold. I love you, he said. I have loved you since the night you stood on Michigan Avenue in that green dress and told me you weren't going to be managed and meant every word of it. She laughed. The real kind. The unperformed kind. That was the third time we'd spoken, she said. I know, he said. I was aware it was inconvenient timing. Extraordinarily inconvenient, she agreed. Yes, he said, and completely unavoidable. The months that followed were not simple. They were not the uncomplicated happiness of two people who had found each other and left the world behind. The world did not cooperate with that version of the story, and neither of them would have chosen it if it had. Simple was not the thing they were built for. There were complications with Voss's organization. As the boundary agreement was formalized, 3 weeks of careful negotiation, conducted through intermediaries that required Luca's full attention and stretched him thin in ways that made him quieter and more internal than usual. Isabella learned to read those periods and give them room, not distance room. The distinction mattered. There were complications with the foundation as it scaled faster than Isabella had planned for grant money arriving before the infrastructure to manage it was fully built, requiring 18-hour days and the specific kind of stress that comes from a good problem that is still a problem. There were family dinners with Patricia that were better than the ones before, and not yet what they would eventually become. Genuine, imperfect human exchanges between a mother and daughter, learning a new language for each other, one word at a time. There were evenings when Luca came home with the specific weight of his world visible in the set of his shoulders, and Isabella would pour him a glass of wine and sit beside him and not fill the silence with words, because she had learned that some silences were not problems to be solved, but spaces to be shared. And he would eventually turn to her, and the weight would visibly diminish, not disappear, but become manageable, and he would say something precise and true about whatever he was carrying, and she would respond with the honest attention she gave everything, and the evening would find its footing. They were in the specific, imperfect, real way that matters good for each other. Not because they were simple, because they were honest. 6 months after the engagement dinner, Isabella stood again at the front of the conference room. The Foundation's second cohort. 16 women this time. The room that had been new and careful 6 months ago felt like something established, something with its own weight and history, its own memory of what had happened inside it. She looked at 16 women at the beginning of the thing she had already survived. She said, "The hardest part is not the circumstance. The hardest part is the moment when you understand that the life you were living was built around other people's definitions of who you were, because that moment requires you to do something terrifying." She paused. It requires you to define yourself. A woman in the front row, 38 years old, 2 kids, had left a situation that did not look bad from the outside and was leaned forward slightly. "How?" she said. Isabella looked at her. "By starting with what's actually true," she said. "Not what you were told, not what was convenient. What is actually specifically undeniably true about who you are." She paused. "And then building toward it. One true thing at a time." The room was completely still. "It doesn't happen all at once," she said. "It happened for me in a restaurant, on a sidewalk, over a kitchen table, in a journalist's office, in 43 emails and 16 applications." She looked at the room. "It happened one true thing at a time, and it is still happening." After the session, Luca was waiting for her in the hallway outside. She stopped when she saw him. He was leaning against the wall with his arms crossed, and his expression unguarded in the specific way it only ever was, around her the full version of his face, with nothing managed or contained. "You were supposed to be in a meeting," she said. "I moved it." "You moved a meeting?" "I wanted to be here," he said simply. "So I moved it." She walked toward him. "How much did you hear?" "Enough," he said. She reached him. He looked at her with the expression that Victoria had named at dinner, the one that said he could not quite believe he had found the thing he was looking for. "One true thing at a time," he said. "Yes," she said. "You're going to change lives," he said. "You already are." "We already are," she said. "Together, in our different ways." He held her gaze. "Yes," he said. "We are." She took his hand. He held it with the certainty that had been there from the first night, the grip of a man who had decided and did not revisit decisions. They walked out of the building into the Chicago afternoon. The city moved around them in its enormous, indifferent, magnificent way. Cabs and people, and the particular light of a fall afternoon, when the air is cold enough to feel real, and the sky is the specific blue that only happens in October. Isabella Carter walked through it beside a man who had chosen her in a room full of people who hadn't, and who had been choosing her deliberately and completely every single day since. Not because she needed him to complete her, because she was already complete, and she had chosen him back. The woman who had spent 34 years being the one that everyone looked past had stopped waiting to be found, and in doing so, had found everything. She had walked into a room expecting to be diminished, said one true thing in the dark, and built a life so full, and so entirely her own, that the woman who once sat at the edge of a table, hoping someone would notice her, was not diminished. She was done. She was seen. She had chosen herself first, and that single act of courage had made every true thing that followed possible.